Good morning, East Point. Unfortunately, we have to be inside today because the rain wasn't cooperating with us, or it rained, obviously, and we can't be outside. But we hope that you will sing along with us, and that this worship time will be just a blessing and something offered up to God. So, would you now sing with us?
Open wide from the depths amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh,
Good morning, East Point. We're so glad you could join us online. It was nice to be in person last week. We'll be back with the beautiful weather, but we're glad that you're here and that you joined us, whether you're on Facebook or on YouTube. Make sure you check in on Facebook and share this out to all those that you know that might just need a little encouragement today, so that you can stay up to date on whether we're going to be meeting at the property or be online due to weather. We do have a new text service, so you can text East Point to 94000, and that will give you updates on the weather, activities, things that are going on at the church. We'll keep you in the loop. We don't send anything that's useless, just things to keep you up to date so you know what's going on where and when. You can also do your tithes and offerings that way. So if you're interested in giving using the text service, you can text GIVE, give to EP, East Point, again to 94000, or online at the website, normal East Point /give. Or you can mail, if you still want to mail a check, you can do that to the building here at 4087 Kirkwood St. George's, and that's Bear, Delaware, 19701. So let's take a minute and we're going to pray over our offering. We, of course, are grateful for any tithes and offerings that are given in any way, and we are now online. The website does have a space for the building fund, so you can make your donations there. If you'd like to give extra or assign money specifically to that, you can do that. So let's just take a moment and thank the Lord and ask for a blessing on our offering. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day. We thank you for East Point. We thank you for the great vision that you have for us, Lord, that we haven't even begun to see yet. And we just ask that all the tithes and offerings that are given, dear Lord, that you might just bless them and multiply them and make them abundant, that we can not glorify ourselves, Lord, but glorify you and further your kingdom and bless the community that you've given us the opportunity to serve. We just pray all these things in your name, Lord. Amen. We do have just a couple quick announcements. The yard sale is going to be on May 1st. We have set a rain date for May 15th, which would be 2 weekends later. If you have things that you want to donate, you can bring them any Sunday that we're on the property. If that doesn't work or you have large items that need to be picked up, you can reach out to me via email, and that's at lease@eastpoint, or you can text my number, and that's 302-757-2172, and we'll set up an arrangement for pickup for you. And then one more quick thing today, there is no post-service connection. So that's just for today, and hopefully next week we will be here in person. Everyone have a great day.
All righty. Good morning this soggy Sunday. I'm going to hand this off to somebody if I can. I know me, I'll drop it on the floor. And hey, you can see me again. I'm back in the screen. All right. How about now? Oh, here I am. So, all right. Well, thanks for joining us this morning. If you're all curled up with a nice hot cup of tea, or perhaps if your addiction runs a little deeper, a hot cup of coffee. But it's whatever it is that you like and whatever it is you have. Hopefully you're comfy and cozy on this rainy day. It's not even all that cold, but it's these days when it just kind of seeps into your bones. Maybe it's a good day to make some soup. I don't know, or a steak. But then again, I think every day is a good day for a steak. So that's no big surprise. We are looking forward, like we said, like Lise just said, we're looking forward to getting back out here and being in person. It's always a lot better when I can see you instead of you just seeing me. But we will do that as soon as the weather allows us to do that. It occurred to me as I was listening to the announcements that sometimes if you're not used to doing texting and things like that, you might not know what is actually being meant by the, that you can text East Point to 94000, I believe is the number. When you first open up your text document, on the top it says 2. That's where the 94000 goes. And then when you get down to the thing like the message you're going to put, you just type in the word East Point. And that's how that would work, because I know I've seen some people trying to put East Point as the address that it's going to, and then putting the code in the bottom. The 94000 goes up in the top as the address. So you might all be going, well, duh, JD, we all knew that. Well, all right. That's fine. Then you can just ignore those last couple of moments. we're gonna talk this week. We're starting like a little mini series here that we're gonna do. It's only gonna last for a few weeks, but I want to state right up front that this is not original content from me. I have blatantly stolen it from Andy Stanley, and then of course slightly improved upon it. No, I just JD-fied it a little bit. I'm calling the series "Forged by Fire" because what we're looking at here is the forging process. I'm not a metal worker. I'm a woodworker, but I do occasionally work with wood. And so one of the things, work with metal. I work with wood every chance I get. But when I do work with metal, and I'm trying to get a little bit more into that, the forging process is a process by which steel or metal is made stronger. And it's done through the heating and hammering and folding, and that forging process strengthens. And that's what I'm looking at, because we have gone through a season of challenge, a season of trial and stress. We've got the things that we've had, the COVID-19, and people are very much all talking about, man, I hope we can get back to normal. When's that going to happen? When can we do that? Well, that's coming. It's coming up pretty quickly. But what is normal? Are we really going to go back to what we had before? Because if we go back to what we had before, then it would mean that we've learned nothing from what we've gone through, and that would be very sad. It's important to learn from what we do. And so I'm hoping that getting back to normal means that we're going to have a new normal that we get back to. And so in looking at that, of course, one of the quotes that comes to my mind when I think about that is one by Friedrich Nietzsche, where he says, "That which does not kill me will make me stronger." And not surprisingly, there's a number of times when Nietzsche says things that I disagree with. I saw at the beach one time, I saw a t-shirt, because at the beach I always enjoy reading t-shirts, and I saw a t-shirt that said, "God is dead, Nietzsche." And on the back it said, "Nietzsche is dead, God." And I just thought that was a funny t-shirt. I don't know, it was an interesting comment to Nietzsche's thing, but I tend to disagree with him on that which, doesn't kill you, makes you stronger, because apparently Nietzsche, one, must not have been very familiar with trauma, because people that have gone through trauma do not feel necessarily that they are stronger for having been traumatized. And if they did, then there's a lot of trauma workers that would be out of jobs, gratefully so, because people are often, the things that we go through, the pain that we experience, makes us feel worse, not better. It makes us feel weaker, not stronger. Nietzsche might have done well to pay a little bit more attention to Socrates with what he had said during his trial. And he says the unexamined life is not worth living. Now, he said this because he was being chastised for asking a lot of questions and teaching some things about that were basically questions that weren't allowed to be asked. You're just supposed to accept certain doctrine as this is the way it is. And so he was being accused of corrupting youth by asking questions that were unseemly. And his response was, well, and they basically said, renounce this or we're going to put you to death. And he's like, if I would rather die than not be able to ask the important questions. So the unexamined life is not worth living. And I think it is so true, because it is not hardship and experience that makes us wiser. It is evaluated hardship. If we don't look at what's going on and take a look and do something purposefully about the experiences we have, they don't make us stronger. They don't make us better. They just make us, having gone through something hard. And you see this because you'll watch people go through the same incident, through the same experience, and some come out with great strength. Some come out with new wisdom and new learnings and new ways of behaving, and some people come out just angry and bitter. Or some people come out completely unchanged. They race back to what they had before. C.S. Lewis, in his book, The Problem of Pain, which probably is the book that I have bought the most copies of, with the exception of the Bible. That's the only thing I bought more copies of, because every time I loan out The Problem of Pain, the people I loan it out to end up wanting to keep it, and so I end up going out and buying another copy. Now, I suppose at some point I should wise up and say, hey, I got an idea, go buy your own copy. But, I'm very happy for people to read that book. It's an older book, it's a great book, but as he talks about the problem of pain, he kind of summarizes one of the things that goes on for all of us, is that we stumble along in our lives. We just go our merry way, very content with the status quo, just kind of like, this is the way things are. And it's almost like whether even as a Christian, it's like, yes, 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 we love God, but he's somehow background to what we have going on in life. And then we get hit with the crisis. We get told we have cancer. A loved one dies. Something very traumatic happens in our life. And all of a sudden, God goes from the background to front and center. And what happens in those times, we either tend to dive deep into God, or we reject him altogether and just back away as though, hey, God, you failed me. But we tend not to stay neutral at that point in time. It changes us a little bit. We look at things differently. And so C.S. Lewis talks about how God would tend to do that. He comes and interrupts. And he said, and at those moments, what he did is he would take God from where he was and put him to where he should have been all along. And that's front and center in his life. And he said that's where he should have been. And he describes it so well in the book, because one of the examples he gives, he says it's like the puppy who hates, is just upset about the dreaded bath that he is receiving to get all the filthiness off of him. And as soon as he is released from that dreaded bath, he shakes himself out the best he can and runs as fast as he can to the nearest, if not manure pile, flower bed to reapply all the dirt that came off. And I thought that is such a good description of what we do, isn't it? Because we have this experience with God, and we think, maybe we confess some things, and we start to feel, we're all clean. And that lasts for a couple of days. We do it for a while. I used to work at a summer camp for kids, a Christian summer camp, where kids would come for a week, and they kind of they didn't have electronics. Of course, back then, we didn't really have electronics. The Game Boy and things like that had not been invented yet. But you didn't have distractions. You didn't have TV to watch and things of that nature. And so we would have these different things. And on Friday night we'd have the campfire, and people would be around, and they got the tears coming, and I've really and all kind of give testimonies about how I've really gotten far from God, but this week has really shown me how important that is, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to live my life for God. I'm going to be all in for Him. And they go home, and for the next week, they really feel that way. But very quickly, we run to the nearest flower bed, start rolling around, getting the dirt back on us, because that's our nature. It is our nature to go back to what we are familiar with. And what I want us to be looking at is, how do we not do that? How do we stay out of the flower bed? How do we let the trial not just be something we've gone through, but how do we learn from it and become better because of it? And like I said, I stole this. If you're saying, JD, I really don't want the dumbed down version, I'm going to go straight to Andy Stanley. If you want to do that, he called it Better For It, is the name of his series. It's a 3 weeks, so feel free to go and watch that instead if you want to. But I'm calling it Forged by Fire because I've just got my own perspective on what's going on. But as I look in like 1 Peter, and in 1 Peter he says, "In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ." What is he saying there? He's saying, and this imagery that he uses is used frequently in the scripture, is that we are tested by fire. And that's why the initial picture that is on there that I have of as you picture that hammer hitting the heated metal, you see the sparks going everywhere. Well, part of what's going on there with the sparks is some of that metal is going away. In fact, the metal, because metal, we don't have hardly any pure metal. All metal has impurities in it. And you want to find those impurities and to make it as pure as possible. Steel, if you didn't know this, steel is basically it is a process of introducing an alloy to iron, and that alloy that's being added is carbon, and the carbon content of how much carbon you add and how you add it determines the quality of the steel that's done. And there's steel on any metal actually has a few different variables. One part of the one variable is what's called hardness, how hard it is. And iron is extremely hard all by itself, but it is not very malleable, or it's not very it's not been annealed. And annealing is basically a chemical process as well as a physical property, where the iron is heated above its normal temperature up to a certain level and held there for a while, and then cooled in a slow process, which adds to its flexibility, its malleability, so that it is more what would be called in the metal world ductile. So it adds to its ductile strength where it can have a little bit more bend without breaking instead of being brittle, because very, very hard things can be brittle. So there's a thing referred to in metal as toughness, and the toughness is a balance between the hardness and the flexibility of it, that ability to flex without breaking. And so that's what I want us to do, because when I thought about this series, I thought about calling it the annealing or the tempering process, because that is also another process of whereby you are adding strength to something by making it actually less hard. So annealing or tempering will make it not as hard, and that's what he's talking about here. You get tried by fire. You go through things, and what's not important, what known as the dross, or again, if you're working with metal, the slag that's there gets thrown off and gets removed so that what is left is pure. And the purer stuff is up much more workable. And that's where we want to be, is workable and pure. So I don't want to go through the fire and then just let cool down and just have all those impurities still there that I've not learned, that I've not been hammered and strengthened and tempered and annealed and made to be better for the process. And I don't think you want that either. I think you want to say, I've gone through all this stuff. Maybe you're saying, I lost my job, or I've run into these different problems. And we're going to look today at what some of those problems are. Because one of the things that happens in this process, like if you're a metal worker, one of the things that they're doing is they're able to find, where are the weaknesses? Where's the weaknesses in the metal, so we can make it so it's uniform and strong, and so that it's not going to be something that will be easily broken. So I want us to look at some of those weaknesses that are there, that are in the thing, and we're just going to look at 3 of them today. I'm going to look at financially, and we're going to look at relationally and personally, or the financial, relational, and personal are the 3 areas that we're going to look at today to see where are we. These are stress points where we can be easily broken. All right, and we all know, it may not surprise you that you look at those. If I was doing a message today on marriage, I'd probably be talking about things like the finances, the relational, and the personal, because these are areas that affect all of our relationships, that affect all of our life. So let's start with the whole issue of financially. The whole world went through a financial adjustment with this COVID-19. That things were different. People lost jobs, the economy went down, and you may have undergone some difficult financial things, but here's something that I know about you. Before you'd ever heard of COVID, before you'd ever heard about this thing going on, at some point you probably heard somebody say something to you like, you know what, it's a really good idea to set aside, about 6 months worth of living expenses in an emergency fund. Set aside an emergency fund so that when the hard times come, you get that. You maybe read that somewhere or heard it from somebody. You maybe even heard it in a message about the idea. It's a financially wise thing to do, is to do that. And you might be thinking about that, and at the time you heard it, you probably thought, hey, that's a good idea. I would love having a 6-month reserve financially in case a crisis ever happened. But if you're like most people, you thought that, and then went along your merry way looking for the next flower bed. Because what's required to actually have that thing in place is some self-discipline. Because when you started into COVID-19, when your boss said, you know what, we don't have enough work for you, we can't keep going, you need to be on, we need to let you go. At that moment, that idea of an emergency fund went from being a good idea that you thought about before to a regret that you didn't do it. Because if you had gone ahead and done that, you would have a whole different approach to things. You're looking at it because it is our nature. It's easy to look at those things and say, yeah, I should, but I don't. And see, with financially, one of the handy things that he says is, I want is better than I owe. And see, that's a self-discipline issue, because there's lots of things that we want, but if we can't afford them, then what we're going to say instead of I want it is I owe. And that's not a good trade. That's not a good trade. So financially, if we're going to get this going, we're going to need the self-control. Proverbs lets us know that a person without self-control is like a city without walls. Is that you're open and you're vulnerable to whatever's going to happen. You have no protection, no barriers, no safety net. And so self-control is the way that we build those walls around our city. It's the way that we give ourselves some protection. Now, you might be saying, Jay, I was in debt before all of this hit, and well, you're probably in good company. It seems like most people are in a good amount of debt. And it's not a huge secret how to get out of debt, because it's a very simple 3-stage process. You save more, you spend less, and then you get out of debt. You eliminate your debt and stay out of debt. And how do you get out of debt? You save more and you spend less. And if you do those 3 things, which is not complicated, then you will find yourself financially much more secure, much more stable. Now, why don't we do those 3 things? Because everybody pretty much knows that. Well, we do that because we lack self-control. And if one thing that we can see with this COVID-19 is how it really benefits us to have some self-control. Because one thing I know about your financial problems, and it's I won't say absolutely all of them, but I would say the vast majority is our financial problems at some place are rooted in our lack of responsibility. That we somehow did not take responsibility. So when COVID came and you lost your job and you were angry at the government for the rules they made around employment, you were angry at your boss because they didn't keep you on, you were angry at, maybe you were angry at other ethnicities because you blamed them for the virus in the first place, or whatever it may be. Unless you're able to look at it and at some point and say, you know what, I have a responsibility here in my financial problems. I didn't act as wisely as I could have. Then you will always be the victim of financial problems if you're always going to blame everybody else. Excuse me. So we have to look at that. We have to take the ownership of what's going on there so that we can, going forward, make better choices. So that's one of the areas, the financially. And the financial is, obviously, like I say, it requires self-control, but it gets us out of a lot of trouble if we are doing that. Whoops. Another area that we're going to is the relational area. Now, this one shows up, and it's, in some ways I find it comical, but in many situations I know there is absolutely nothing funny about it. But you have found yourself being locked behind closed doors with people that maybe you're not used to being locked behind closed doors with very often, like your spouse. And being together so often, being in this, under the same roof for lengthy periods of time, might have shown up some of the stress fractures that were there in the relationship all along. And you didn't deal with them because you didn't have to, because you could ignore them, because you could go off to work, and for the little bits and times that you would see one another, you could play the game, you could put on the show, you could paste on a smile, and when things got too annoying, you could hop in the car and go someplace and ignore it. But you've run into a time period here where you couldn't. You were together. Some people found that they absolutely loved being together during this, that it was nice having that time under the same roof. Some people found this is horrible. It's maybe not a surprise that depression has gone way up during COVID. So have marriages that have been starting to fall apart. There's been a lot of relational difficulties that have shown up during this COVID period because it's hard to fight something that you can't ignore. I mean, before we could ignore it and just let it go. But when you can no longer ignore it, now it's a problem. We joke about stuff like this, don't we? We joke about when somebody retires, and saying, oh, the person's at home underfoot all the time now. They need to go find a volunteer job. And we joke about that, but sometimes it's not funny at all to find out that a person that you've invested your life into is somebody you can't be around. Or maybe you found out that you've got a child that you've got nothing in common with. You can't connect with them. You don't understand them. They don't understand you. And when you're left together in a close space, you really have nothing to talk about, nothing to do together, because you don't connect. And you start to wonder, well, what's going on here? How do I connect with my child? How do I connect with my spouse? And again, just like with the finances, a starting point is for you to look at what's going on and say, what's my role? What's my part in all of this? Because the easy thing to do is to say, well, they're doing something really annoying. I can't stand when they do this. It's, like I used to complain about how I would say Judy didn't turn the shower thing back to the coming down, because we used to have the tub. Now it's just a shower. I got rid of the tub, but when it was just a tub and the water wouldn't come out the bottom, it hit me in the back of the head, and I'd complain until somebody said, well, why don't you just turn it down before you turn the water on? And I thought, well, that's that's kind of smart. Maybe instead of complaining about something, I could just do the very simple solution, which I kept telling her was a simple solution, but I wasn't willing to apply it to myself because I wanted the problem to be hers and not mine. And isn't that what we do? It's very easy to see where the problem is in somebody else. I was talking with Jeff this morning, and we were talking about some things, and he reminded me of a situation where I pickle things. I do a lot of things with food because I like food. And I had put some stuff in the refrigerator, and I just set a lid on it because I didn't want to have it sealed tight, but I just wanted it to be on there. And it was something which had food and liquid and all kinds of stuff, and it might have been some pickling things I was doing, or I don't remember exactly what it was. But Judy went to do some cleaning out in the refrigerator, grabbed hold of it by the lid and pulled, and it spilled all over the floor. And right at that minute, she's like, that lid wasn't on. I said, of course it wasn't on. And we're in this moment where it could be this big battle. Is that her fault? Is that my fault? Whose fault was it? It was a breakdown in communication is what it was. It wasn't anybody's fault. She didn't do something wrong by grabbing the lid. I hadn't done something wrong by not, unless I should, maybe I should have labeled it, loose lid, caution, handle with care. But the reality is, we're going to have things come up in life. And I looked and said, you know what? I should have labeled that, or I should have tightened the lid so that you knew that wasn't on there tight, so that wouldn't happen. And she was, and the funny thing is, I'm saying it, she's like, oh no, that's all right. I should grab it by the jar instead of by the lid. And neither of us, I don't think, did anything wrong. But instead of having conflict, we had affirmation for one another from looking at this and saying, what was my role? What could I have done differently? As we come out of this, as we start to look at what we call getting back to normal, and we look, what is going to be the new normal? Are we going to go back to, what? You spilled that. That's your fault. Or we're going to go back to, hey, what was my role? How can I do that? What are you going to learn from this? Are you going to go through the fire and come out being the same person and say, oh, good, I can go back to ignoring my family. I can go back to being separate from my spouse, or I can go back to my kids do their own thing and I don't have to pay attention to them because I just don't get my kids anyway. Or are you going to turn some new chapters in your life? Are you going to say, you know what, this COVID, which I saw as a problem, is showing me that there is new life to be had, that I can be different in my relationships. It's because it's been difficult to get together. The times when I've been able to have like all the kids over for dinner and have them, just get them all in our house at the same time, to me have been wonderful. We've instituted a new thing of a game night that we have when the kids will come over. And at first, I was so busy cooking the whole time. They said, stop doing elaborate meals. Let us have something simple so Dad can be playing the game instead of, cooking all night long, because I do get carried away. But and so we modified it because the kids were saying, Dad, we want to come for a game night, but we want to just sit down and enjoy you, not just eat your food. So we've simplified the food preparation because they let me know an area where I was making a mistake. I was busy being Martha or Mary. And he says, no, don't be there doing everything. Don't be serving all the time. My children are teaching me. And I love that my children can teach me, that they are at a stage where they're saying, this is not what we want. This is not the better thing. And so as you come out of it, as you spend that time together, are you learning from each other? Are you finding new ways? Are you talking about it? Or are you just saying, you know what, this is too much, I can't handle it. I want out of this marriage. I want out of this family. I went out of, maybe there's other relationships which you found, you know what, we haven't been able to get together and I haven't missed it one bit with this other person. I thought that I had to have them in my life all the time, but I haven't missed them at all. Well, what's that about? Check it out. Learn from it. I'm not saying, hey, here is the answer, but I'm saying, are you looking at it? Are you allowing the master's hammer to shape you and to forge you and to make you into something which is better as a result? And the other area is personally. And by personal, this is more talking about your internal world, what's going on. Now, this could be your worldview, because I have heard more worldview discussions in the last year than I think I had in quite a while before that, when people talk about the nature of how things are. You know, people start to talk about, you know, is there a good God if he allows there to be this worldwide pandemic? You know, how does a good and loving God allow that? It's one of these questions that comes up so often. And it maybe through this whole thing, you've been forced into evaluating, what do you think about the world? What do you think about life? What is your relationship and what's your thinking about God? What is your theology when it comes to these sorts of things? Because deep within us, we all kind of want to hold on to the idea of prosperity gospel. You know, and the prosperity gospel is basically that good things are going to, you know, you do good things, you do all the right stuff, and you're going to be blessed and have prosperity. You do the wrong stuff, and you're going to be cursed and have trouble. You know, and you might say, I don't believe that, JD. I know that thinking is wrong. And yet, we find ourselves in subtle ways behaving as though that is the truth. We find ourselves doing things and just sort of almost expecting, like, God, you owe me here. You owe me. Look at how I've been serving you. Look what I've been doing for you. I shouldn't have to be going through this difficult time. I shouldn't have to deal with this. And we shape God in an image that we've created for him, instead of recognizing that we're created in his image. We try to reshape him in ours. And we say, this is what it is to be merciful. This is what it is to be just. And we set up the rules and say, and that this, God, then is how you should behave. And I encourage you to take some time to really look at your own life and to think about this, because it's easy. And I had to, when I was looking at that, thinking, well, that's crazy theology. But then to really take the time to look at my life and say, where do I live by crazy theology? Where do I behave as though that crazy theology is in fact the theology that shapes my life and my behavior? And quite honestly, that's a sobering thing to look at it and to say, wow, I do behave as though God owes me. I do act as though somehow I deserve more because of the life I'm living. I'm living a righteous life, and so I should have righteous returns on all my investment here. You know, it's like, and we have to remember that God took the most righteous person that ever walked the earth and allowed the most awful thing to happen to them. So does God allow bad things to happen to good people? Thank heavens, yes. It's why we are able to have a relationship with God, because he sent his son to die for us. He allowed him to be persecuted unfairly, not just like, oh, he had a hard time. He was unfairly persecuted and died a cruel death with having done nothing to deserve it, not one thing. Now, I know that when bad things come into my life, I don't have to look long to find usually where I deserve it. I've earned it. It's just part of it. Even when it's stuff that's totally out of my control, because my basic philosophy is, I am a sinner far from God. It is only by grace that I am allowed to have anything. All that I have, from the breath inside me to my ability to walk or eat or to, I had nothing to do with being born in a wealthy country. I just was. I was born in this wealthy country and have been able to experience the wealth. And at some point in time, we start to see that as our right. We are entitled to that. But I always want to go back to, I came naked and alone into this world. And that's all I have ever deserved. I don't have a right to more than that. So everything I get is a blessing. So if that's true, then that should shape my behavior. It should move my entitlement away from I deserve to I am blessed, and build a thing of gratitude. For me to start to understand that maybe the God that I'm worshiping, the God that I think is supposed to give me good things, is a God that I should lose my faith in. And instead I should develop a faith in the God who is holy and righteous and good and who is always there. And that's what I guess when I think about the personal, maybe your faith has been shaken with all that's going on. Maybe you've looked at this and said, how can I believe in a God that would allow this to happen? And it's an area where I would say you need to investigate that. Is that your faith? Is that what you believe? Or does your faith need to grow up? Do you need to get rid of what you had before? Or are you going to go back to a view of the world which says, do good things and good things come to you? Now, in the Proverbs, those are general principles. That if you do nice things, if you do good things, you are more likely to receive those good things. That's typically understood. However, that doesn't mean that you have earned them. It's just a principle of how life works. It's the way that things typically happen. So it's a time for us to be looking and saying, what do we really think? So I'm just going to leave you with 3 questions, and these questions are designed for if you're watching this as a family, you could be talking about this. If you're watching this all alone, maybe you get hold of somebody else, you can at least just think about the questions and maybe have a chance to talk about them. But I want you to ask you, where have you felt the most pressure during this season of trial? Over this last year, this COVID, what has been the biggest pressure for you, and where you have felt, hey, this has been hard. Maybe it's financial, maybe it's spiritual, maybe it's, in your personal relationships. Maybe it's something completely different than what we've talked about today. But just be thinking about where have you felt that pressure? Identify it, and just think about what's that telling you? What can you learn from that? And then the next question is there anything that you should have been doing that would have better prepared you for what you are currently experiencing? Is there anything that you should have been doing that would better prepare you for what you're currently experiencing? And if you can't think of anything there, my guess is that you are not very creative in your thinking, or you're not quite getting the point. Because at any point in life, I can look back to my previous points in life and say, oh, I should have done this. It would have been better. I like doing construction types of work. And every time I do something, if I'm at home building a bookshelf or a stand for something, I learn things where I say, oh, if I'd have done it this way from the beginning, it would have been better. And so my next shelf is a little better than my last shelf, because I can look and say, I should have done this. Now, if I don't look and think about that, then my next shelf is going to have the same problems as my last shelf. And the next one after that, if I don't learn from those things. So what could you have been doing that would have better prepared you? Certainly there's something. And the last question is, what can you begin doing now to ensure you will be better later? Is there something you can start? Is there a practice you can start? I don't know if you're one of these types of people. I know that I definitely am. I get onto things where I say, I'm going to do this every day now. So that it's just a little bit like, I tell myself, I'm going to clean my garage out very thoroughly, and I'm going to just spend 30 minutes a day. I'll get up in 30 minutes a day, I'll do some cleaning, and, at the end of so much time, the place will be clean. And I think that's a great idea. I think I'll do that. And so I get up extra early, and I clean my garage for 30 minutes, and I'm patting myself in the back. And the next day, hey, I'm just kind of tired. I don't feel like getting up that early. So I'll just wait a little bit, and I'll do my 30 minutes later in the day, and the day gets busy, and I don't get those 30 minutes in. And before long, that whole idea of spending 30 minutes a day cleaning the garage is well in the rear view mirror. It's like, yeah, that was a good idea, but it wasn't practical. I tell myself that wasn't realistic. I couldn't do it. But every now and then I stop and say, had I done that 6 months ago when I said I was going to do that, I would be functioning in a clean, orderly, organized garage that's all set up for the woodworking I want to do, instead of stepping over things that are in the way that I should have cleaned out months ago. And I think that we all have those ideas, but then we don't do them. See, it's great to have ideas and good intentions, but it's the action that'll make the difference. So what can you start to do today that will make you better tomorrow? And so talk about these 3 questions with one another if you can, any chances you get to interact and get your answers and have that discussion. And we will talk to you next week. Thanks for coming. Let's pray. God, we do thank you for your goodness, for your love, for your desire for us, and for our goodness in the ways that you provide for us. Help us, Lord, to take the trying times that we go through, and rather than just feel upset or put out or indignant at the difficulties, to instead to look and say, this is our chance to go through your purifying fire, to come out as pure gold, to come out as strong and malleable and having a toughness that allows us to weather the storms of life. So we just thank you that you give us these opportunities. Help us to make the most of them. In Christ's name, amen. I will see you next week, hopefully in person.